Hello, hello. This is me with some answers to boundary questions. So I'm going to read these one by one and then go into it. The first question is, my sister pointed out that I'll drop anything to help someone else to do things if they ask for help. But I often don't do those same things for myself. For example, I'll help her check her insurance info to see if something's covered, but I put off making medical appointments that would be good for me. She asked why I can't treat myself and my needs the same way as others. So this is kind of pointing out to the larger picture where we have boundaries, but then beneath them, we have needs. And one layer down, if you go to the next hurdle, we have values. So our boundaries, our needs, and our values are kind of embedded in this kind of tensegrity structure that they all feed into each other. And what would be very interesting is to explore the somatic form under when somebody asks you for help, that something happens inside of you, that there's a process of leaving yourself. So from a boundary structure, that is actually a loss of the containing and filtering function of boundaries. Boundaries have many functions, and there's a containing and a filtering. So here's you. I'm going to use this cup. Here's you. And here in this case is, oh, there's even like a little person on it. Here's you. And then here's sister outside of you. Let's say that this is sister. Here's like sister outside of you. And as she asks for help, you leave your own structure. So the containing function of the cup, you leave your own structure and you move your consciousness, your attention, your awareness over towards sister. It almost has, especially in families where there's enmeshment and codependence, there's almost like a magnetic quality. It's like a, as somebody has a need, it's like, oh, I am here for you, right? So my energy, my life force, my consciousness, what is mine for me, and especially in family systems and lineages where there was scarcity, that I need to give you what you need, but then that leaves me without. Yeah, so from a boundary structure, we have an issue here with containment and filtering. Typically, when we don't put ourselves first and someone else's need becomes almost like an emergency, like there's this magnetic quality of, I need to help you in order for me to settle, we know that that comes from the attunement phase of our development. And this is when we actually develop in family structures where there isn't enough. And we learn that in order for us to not feel unsettled, we need to constantly settle ourselves through taking care of everyone else. At the end, you're doing it for you, but you're only getting these little crumbs of settling. You get unsettled because somebody needs something, then you get settled. You get unsettled, and then you get settled. But your own life force, your own energy, you don't get to use it for yourself. And this adaptation comes from when we're very young. So anywhere between 2 and 4 years old. And for some people, it can be traced all the way back to in utero, where mom was dealing with some difficulties. And so you had to give up your own life force for someone else in order to settle you. The good news is that with awareness and with a reconnection to the containment function of the boundaries, so we have energetic boundaries, the skin boundary is really essential in this containment function, that I start to track somatically my organization, my form, what my energy does when somebody needs me. that actually you're unsettled inside when somebody needs you. And how do you deal with that? And then added to that later, once you haven't given all of your life force to others, right? When some people will talk about, I'm bleeding out. Like when you haven't bled out for others, you actually have some blood for yourself. That when I go and I help someone else, but I don't make my own medical appointment, it's not because there's something wrong with me or I'm broken. It's because I don't have the energy. I've already given it. Yeah. And people will have all sorts of cognitive ideas, beliefs, distortions around this. Like, oh, I don't feel worthy. That's an aftermath of what's the primary thing here, which is the containment function of the boundary is not working. Yeah. I hope that this is helpful. As always, I don't know you. I don't know your situation. This is kind of a general how I see this function in people and in family systems. And based on my experience, if it's not helpful, just let it flow down the river. Here is the next question. I've been listening and studying Lisa Feldman Barrett and her book on emotions. And for those of you who don't know, she's a neuroscientist. I'm very much enjoying it, but it's making me doubt myself and question my feelings and emotions even more as being guides to build my choices around. For me, one of the main reasons I don't set boundaries earlier is I think that I don't always trust my feelings and emotions, especially when my overall capacity is low. I try not to set boundaries until I get into a more regulated, stable adult consciousness space. I'm curious how you view Lisa's work around emotions and how to apply it practically and usefully in regards to when to be in the space to set boundaries. Very big question. So, if we kind of look at some of the main tenets of what is taught by Lisa, and in her book and in her lectures, there's this idea that emotions are social constructs and also that they're learned. This is quite different from affect theory and the idea that emotions are actually preloaded as software in the system. And I think is anything that we use to guide our understanding and practice of embodying emotions, it's really nice to have all these different views so that we can see in our experience what is helpful. Yeah, what helps us navigate. One thing that the person asking this question is what really got my attention there is I don't trust myself. And it's very, very important that this is not always a bad thing. People talk about trust like you need to trust yourself. But what do we trust? Let me bring a little helper here. So say that it's Friday and it's 2024. Yeah, in January, February 2nd. And here you are, walking about your day. You're 45 years old. And then there's something that comes in towards you that requires you to set a boundary. Or somebody's already crossed your boundary and impacted you, and then you need to do something about it. It's not just you being touched, right? There are layers being touched inside that something might wake up, and the questioner here asked about child consciousness. Something might wake up that is young, or all the way to maybe when you were really itty-bitty and you were alone in a hospital and things were done to you without your consent and there's nothing you could do, right? And so you're going to have a somatic experience. You're going to have sensations. You're going to have emotions. You're going to have imagery. You're going to have thoughts. You're going to have movements, postures, forms, and the impulses to connect or disconnect or push or attack or do something, run away. And so then it's important that we're able to track ourselves in real time and really slow down. And this is where it's helpful to have another person in the room with you so that they can give you some extra nervous system battery for you to be able to really have the energy to separate what is present time, what's past timelines. And as you sense yourself coming more into a present, connected, more adult feeling, and those of you who've done work with me know that we actually practice what it feels like to be in your adult sense of self, whether it's a connection to the midline, whether it's something that shows up in your spine, whether it's something that shows up in your heart, in your gut, that all of you who've done work with me, you know this, like, oh yeah, here I am in my adult. Here I am off my axis, and I'm actually noticing intensity of emotions. I'm noticing confusion. I'm noticing something that I know that my mind, my body, my heart, I'm not in this clear lake. That it's very wise to wait until you come to clarity. And some of you, that might be 3 days and 2 therapy sessions until you get to that clarity. So you can separate the timelines. And you know that in present time, you're able to set a boundary that feels stable and strong and mutually respectful, right? Instead of going into the automatic habits that could be a rigidity, or it can be just, fawning, freezing, falling apart, not having any boundary whatsoever. And so, whether you're using Lisa's example, as in the way that she teaches about emotions, or you come more from affective theory, that in either way, no matter where you get your theoretical understanding for what and about what emotions are, at the end of the day, the somatic practice of embodying emotions means really being with, slowing down, giving space, allowing the digestion of emotion, and allowing the timelines to take their rightful space so that you know you're acting from now aligned with your needs and with your values. Aligned with your needs and with your values. So you're just not running on the primitive software. Yeah. If you're setting a boundary with a rock that's trying to fall on you on your hike, that's one thing. That's primitive software only. When we're working with not just our physical boundaries, but emotional boundaries, relational boundaries, it becomes a little more complex, right? And so time, space, digestion, really, really important. And I too remember when I was first getting introduced to Lisa Feldman Barrett's work, I was like, like, am I making all of this up? And the reality is, life is always bringing information, and how we relate to the information is a way to bring ourselves into our adult consciousness and see from the present moment what is right. What is right. And of course, we can all look back and look at things that we could have done better, we could have done in a more refined way. But as we get to know ourselves and as we get to know each other, hopefully we can act in ways that were more aligned with our needs and with our values. Yeah. So I hope this is helpful. Last but not least question: how does food play in with boundaries? We could talk for days about this, but let's take 2 extreme examples. In one example, your boundary is being violated over and over and over again, and you go into a freeze collapse, which, when in the master class, I'll be talking about fitting in and fawning and all these ways that we survive boundary violations. And there's a physiological impact of that. It's not just like, you crossed my boundary, I don't like it. It's like, no, you crossed my boundary, and now the high tone of my dorsal vagus nerve is running the show. And so my digestion is being impacted. I don't have access to energy. I might feel sluggish. I might feel unmotivated. I might feel hopeless and helpless. I might feel like, oh my God, I have no agency, I have no choice in my life. And the physical ramifications of freeze, where we have a limited oxygen and glucose supply and oxygen conservation, mean that I don't have enough energy going through my body. Yeah. I don't have enough energy to light up my eyes and my face, and I don't have enough energy to pay attention to my children and to, go empty the dishwasher. And so I'm going to end up eating to get myself some energy. I might also end up eating foods that are stimulating. I might also end up eating so much that I can feel the pressure from the inside in my stomach. And that gives me a sense of I'm here and I'm present. Yeah. Derek and I have a little piece around that inside the teachable course platform around how that was for him. Right. And now the other extreme might be when we're not able to set a boundary or a boundary has been violated, we go into hyperarousal. We go into this kind of fight flight mode and we feel an incredible charge inside. The system is unsettled. And then I can use food to create a parasympathetic response, to create a rest and digest response and settle the system. I can also use food that is in some way, so we're talking about food that has biochemical and neurotransmitter effects, but also it has physiological effects that if I push enough on the stomach and I push on the pyloric sphincter, that goes, there's a response and a settling. There's a cascade, there's a chemical settling cascade. And so I can both give myself energy, perk myself up, or I can push the energy down. And the best thing about this, especially if it's cyclical and I do it often, is that we'll all have some story or some way that we think about food, or we tell ourselves that we're bad or we screwed up and we feel shame or we feel guilt or we feel like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done this. That then there's this massive kind of extracting yourself from whatever is going on and moving into the alternate universe of food. So I can think about food, I can make plans about how I'm going to eat tomorrow after I was so bad today, all of these things that kind of give us another life. It's like an alternate life that you get to live around food. And interestingly, you get to play with boundaries in there. This is allowed. This is not allowed. I'm okay with this. I'm not okay with this. Oh, I'm just going to let all my control and my boundaries down and everything can come in. Or in the case of binging and purging, I'm also going to reject. I'm going to overdo and I'm going to reject. So very often, boundary dynamics, things that we cannot say with our mouth or with our behavior to others, we get played out somatically, where it somaticizes. And no, I can't say no to you, but I'm going to throw up this food. And we don't want to take anyone's coping behaviors away. They're helping, they're there for a reason. But we want to be curious about where they're not helpful and they're causing harm, and where they're actually a replacement for something your system hasn't learned how to do yet. So if there's other ways to say no and to reject and to push away what is not helpful, what is not nourishing, or what is harmful, what is toxic, that there's other ways other than throwing up to do that. And when it somaticizes and then we become really just interested in that behavior, and we might shame ourselves for the behavior or feel like we broke ourselves with that behavior, then we go further and further away from the actual issue, which is, oh, there's things that I'm not able to push against. There's things I cannot keep out or reject. And then there's a way that I might do that with my behaviors. Anyhow, many, many, many different options for why we do what we do. I welcome more of your questions in the Facebook group. I welcome more of your questions in the Teachable platform where the comments are around the Boundary Master Class. You're also welcome to email me, and I'm happy to answer them just like this, and I hope that it's helpful. I'll see you February 7th is when our Boundary Master Class begins. It's available live, it's available as recordings, 8 2-hour sessions where we go through the somatic orientation and organization of how we do boundaries, not just how we think about them, but how we do them, how we live them from the inside out. I'm grateful to all of you. Hope that this was helpful, and I'll see you soon.